If your business partner stopped paying you, you'd dissolve the partnership. It's just logic. So why is it considered immoral for a husband to step outside the marriage when his wife denies him a fundamental, foundational part of the marital contract? Today we're debating the uncomfortable truth. Logically, he should look elsewhere. Morally, he can't. Let's talk about why. Look, I'm going to say something that most people won't say out loud. Marriage is a contract. And I know that sounds cold. I know that sounds transactional. But hear me out. A marriage is built on multiple agreements, spoken and unspoken. There's the emotional agreement, where you promise to be each other's safe harbor. There's the financial agreement, where you combine resources and build something together. And yes, there's the physical agreement, the intimate connection, the closeness, the sex. Think of it like a three-legged stool. You've got emotional intimacy on one leg, financial partnership on another, and physical connection on the third. Now, what happens when you remove one of those legs? The whole thing falls. And I want you to really feel this for a second. Picture a man. He's been working 10, 12-hour days. He's grinding, he's providing, he's doing everything he was told a good husband is supposed to do. He comes home exhausted, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually. He's poured everything he has into his family. And all he wants is to feel connected to his wife, to feel wanted, to feel like he matters to her beyond the paycheck he provides. But when he walks through that door, nothing. Cold shoulders, one-word answers. And when night comes, she's already asleep, or she's too tired, or she's got a headache again. This is what I call the invisible breach of contract. Because here's the thing, if he stopped paying the mortgage, everyone would see the consequences. The bank would come, the house would be at risk. There would be visible accountability. But when she closes the physical department of their partnership permanently, with no explanation, no negotiation, no compromise, nothing happens. There's no accountability. There's no consequence. He just suffers in silence, while still being expected to fulfill every other part of his role. It's brutal, and nobody talks about it. And here's the thing that nobody wants to acknowledge. When a woman stops engaging sexually with her husband, she's not just saying, "I don't feel like it tonight." She's fundamentally breaking one of the core agreements of the marriage. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about temporary situations. I'm not talking about illness or postpartum recovery or genuine physical limitations. I'm talking about the conscious, ongoing withholding of intimacy. And until I started this channel, until I started hearing from the thousands of men who write to me and the thousands of women who admit to doing this, I had no idea how common it was. It's everywhere. Men living in what I call roommate marriages, sharing a house, sharing bills, sharing nothing else. And so the logical argument becomes this. If your wife says, "I don't want to have sex with you," and she means it, and she's committed to withholding, then logically, reasonably, a man should be able to meet that need elsewhere. That's not a radical statement. That's just math. She's denied a foundational piece of marriage. She's removed something that he was led to believe would be part of this partnership. And in a purely logical world, he should have options. In fact, there are cultures around the world where women will say, "Go ahead, get a girlfriend, get a mistress," because at least then it takes the burden off of her. But that's not our culture, and here's where it gets complicated. Because we live in what I call a gynocentric or woman-centered society. And in this society, there's a story that we all accept without question. The story goes like this. If a woman doesn't want to have sex with her husband, it must be his fault. He must be doing something wrong. He must not be helping around the house. He must not be emotionally available. He must not be romantic enough. The man is always the problem. And you know what the most insidious part of this is? The chore play myth. You've heard this, right? The idea that if a man just does more around the house, more dishes, more laundry, more vacuuming, that somehow this will translate into more intimacy. Help her feel less stressed and she'll want you more. Honestly, it's one of the biggest lies men have been sold. I've talked to thousands of men who tried this. Men who became full-time housekeepers in their own homes. Men who did everything, cooked dinner, bathed the kids, cleaned the kitchen, hoping, praying that tonight would be different. And you know what happened? Nothing. Or worse, she found something else to criticize. You didn't fold the towels right. You loaded the dishwasher wrong. You forgot to wipe down the counters. The goalposts always move. Because here's the truth. Chore play was never about the chores. It was about control. It's a way to keep a man running on a hamster wheel, always chasing, never arriving. Always trying to earn something that should be freely given in a loving marriage. And when he finally says, "I've done everything, what more do you want?" he gets labeled as entitled, demanding, only thinking about one thing. This is gaslighting, pure and simple. And we've created this narrative through years and years of women living in what I call their victim stories. Here's what I mean. A woman will tell her friends, her mother, her therapist, everyone about all the things her husband has done to her, all the ways he's failed, all the reasons she doesn't want to be close to him anymore. And nobody questions it. Nobody says, "Wait, is that the whole story?" Nobody asks, "What might you be contributing to this dynamic?" Because that would be victim blaming. And we don't do that, right? And society reinforces it. We had the Me Too movement. And look, were there men who abused their power? Absolutely. But it was a small percentage. And yet we created hashtags like "Believe All Women," as if women are incapable of manipulation, as if every story told is the complete story. And what did that do? It silenced men. It made it impossible for a man to say, "I have needs too, I'm struggling too, I feel rejected and unwanted in my own home." Because if he says that, he's part of the problem. He's one of those men. He doesn't understand what women go through, so he stays quiet. He swallows it. He tells himself he's being selfish for even wanting physical connection with his own wife. And the loneliness grows, and the resentment builds, and nobody is talking about what this does to a man's soul. So when a man is being sexually rejected in his own marriage, when he's starving for connection, nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to understand that his wife might be weaponizing intimacy against him, because that would mean acknowledging something uncomfortable about women, and we don't do that. But here's the darker truth, and this is something I've seen over and over again. Some women provoke their husbands. They push buttons, they criticize, they dismiss, they reject, over and over until finally he snaps. He raises his voice, he says something harsh, and then she can point the finger and say, "See how he talks to me? See what he did to me?" Let me paint this picture for you. It's 10 p.m. The kids are finally asleep. He's been waiting all day for this moment, just a few minutes of connection with his wife. Maybe tonight will be different. He sits next to her on the couch. She doesn't look up from her phone. He tries to put his arm around her. She shifts away. Slightly, just enough. He asks, "Everything okay?" She sighs. That sigh. You know the one. The one that says, "Why are you even talking to me right now?" "I'm just tired," she says, eyes still on the phone. He tries again. "I just feel like we haven't connected in a while." And then it comes, the eye roll, the dismissal. "Everything is about sex with you, isn't it? That's all you ever think about." Now he's on the defensive. Now he's the problem. He was just trying to connect, just trying to feel close to his own wife. And now he's being painted as some kind of animal who can't control himself. So he pushes back. Maybe his voice gets a little louder. Maybe he says something he shouldn't. And now she has what she needed. See, this is why I don't want to be close to you. Look how you're acting. This is what I call the moral high ground strategy. She pokes, she prods, she withholds, she dismisses, night after night after night, until finally, he reacts like a human being who's been pushed to his limit. And that reaction, that's her ammunition. That's her evidence. That's what she'll tell her friends, her family, her therapist, her lawyer. He has anger issues. He yells at me. I don't feel safe. And a good man, a genuinely good man, buys into that gaslighting. He says to himself, I did do those things. I did react that way. I must be the problem. And that's the trap. That's the matrix these men are living in. So here's the thing. The logical argument is solid. It makes complete sense. If someone breaks their end of a contract, you should be able to seek alternatives. But good men don't operate on logic alone. Good men have morals. Good men have values, often deeply religious values, a structure, a code that guides them. And this is what creates the trap within the trap. Because a good man knows deep in his bones that going outside the marriage would violate everything he stands for, even if it's logical, even if it's justified. If he did it, he would feel guilty. He would feel ashamed. Not because society would judge him, but because he would judge himself. This is what I call the remorse loop. It works like this. He's rejected night after night, week after week, month after month. The loneliness builds, the resentment grows, and eventually, he thinks about looking elsewhere. Maybe he even does look elsewhere, but the moment he does, the moment he crosses that line, his own conscience destroys him, because he wasn't true to himself. He went against his own moral code. And I want you to understand the biology of this for a second. A man's need for physical intimacy isn't just horniness. It's not just about the act itself. It's about feeling desired, feeling chosen, feeling like he matters to someone. When that's denied, repeatedly, consistently, coldly, something happens in his brain. Rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Studies have shown this. The brain doesn't distinguish between being punched and being rejected by someone you love. So every night that he reaches for her and she turns away, every time she sighs and says, "Not tonight," every cold shoulder and every excuse, his brain is registering pain, real physiological pain. And then there's the other side, the theology of his morals. Because this man, this good man, was probably raised to believe that lust is a sin, that looking at another woman is wrong, that his vows mean something sacred. So now he's lying in bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, caught between his biology screaming for connection and his beliefs telling him he's a sinner for even wanting it. He feels like a monster for having a biological drive, for being human. And he asks himself, what's wrong with me? Why do I want this so badly? Am I really that selfish? The answer is no. He's not selfish. He's not a monster. He's a man who was promised a partnership and is living in solitary confinement. But he'll never say that out loud. Because good men don't complain. Good men provide. Good men endure. So now he's trapped in two prisons. The prison of a sexless marriage and the prison of his own guilt for trying to escape it. And I see this all the time. Men who stepped outside, who live in this constant state of inner turmoil. They're not out there celebrating their freedom. They're tortured by what they did. Because good men, the kind of men who end up in these marriages with women who withhold, tend to have extremely high moral standards. That's actually part of why they're targets. A woman knows she can push this man to his breaking point, and he still won't leave. He still won't cheat, because his values won't let him. She can have it all, the house, the lifestyle, the security, without ever having to meet his needs, because she knows he's too good to do anything about it. And now we get to the part that most people really don't want to hear. Some women do this on purpose. Not consciously always. Sometimes it's buried. Sometimes it's instinct. But the strategy is there. Here's how it works. A woman withholds intimacy, month after month, year after year. She pushes her husband further and further into desperation. Why? Because she wants him to cheat. She wants him to do the unthinkable, the ultimate betrayal. Because once he does that, she has all the power. Now she's the victim. Now she has the moral high ground. Now she can tell everyone, her family, her friends, the courts, he cheated on me. That's why the marriage didn't work. And nobody will ask what led him there. Nobody will ask about the years of rejection. Nobody will question her role in any of it. She gets to be the victim. She gets sympathy. She gets a favorable divorce settlement. She gets the story. He destroyed our family. And the good man, he gets painted as the villain, even though, and this is the cruel part, even though she pushed him to that point. It's a strategy, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The withholding isn't just about not wanting sex. It's about creating a scenario where no matter what he does, he loses. If he stays faithful, he suffers in silence forever. If he cheats, she wins the narrative. Either way, she's in control. So where does this leave us? Look, I'm not here to tell any man to go cheat on his wife. And I'm not here to excuse infidelity as if it has no consequences. What I am here to do is shine a light on a dynamic that nobody talks about, to validate the experience of men who feel trapped, who feel unseen, who feel like they're going crazy because the whole world tells them they're the problem. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. The argument that a man should be able to look elsewhere when his wife breaks the marriage contract, it's logical, it's reasonable, it makes sense. But the reality is, most good men won't do it, because they have morals that matter more to them than their own needs. And honestly, that's both their greatest strength and the chain that binds them. So what's the answer? For the woman listening, if you recognize yourself in what I've described today, if you've been living in those woman ways of withholding, weaponizing, manipulating without even realizing it, there is a path forward. It starts with resolving the unhealthy relationship you have with yourself. Because until you do that, you'll keep sabotaging every relationship you're in. And for the good men listening, the ones who feel like they've given away all their power, the ones who don't recognize themselves anymore, you don't have to stay trapped. You can rebuild your strength, your confidence, your sense of self. You can learn to show up in your marriage in a completely different way, not as a doormat, not as an aggressor, but as a man who knows his worth. Because when you change, everything around you changes too. Thank you so much for being here today. I know this was a heavy one, but these conversations matter, and I'll see you in the next one.